Welcome to Between Soul and Sky. This is a soul-centered invitation to a spirit-led, soul-inspired podcast dedicated to guiding you on the evolutionary journey of the soul. Here's your host, Ricky from the Star Whisperer.
Welcome to yet another episode of Between Soul and Sky. And I am super, super excited for today's episode. And I have an incredibly special guest coming on today. We have Jennifer James, and she is here to talk to us today all about grief and loss. And Jennifer, welcome on in. Thank you for wanting to do this with me. How are you doing today?
Hi, Ricky. Thank you. I am so honored to be talking with you today and particularly about this subject.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It is. For those of you that know me and whether or not you're new, this is such a sensitive and special subject. And I feel like there's so much depth that we're about to get into today with this topic. So wherever you are listening to our conversation today, I invite you to pause, to stop, to breathe, to reflect, and to listen with an open heart. And I do invite you to share your thoughts and your questions that you may have, or whatever is surfacing for you emotionally as we have these conversations today. We both would love to hear from you. And so I'm going to read a little bit of Jennifer's bio for y'all to get to know her just a little bit. And so Jennifer is a master hairstylist of over 40 years. She is a mom of two children, a tried and true August Virgo for those of you. She's a lifelong question asker, a coordinator of chaos, which I love, and a first-time podcaster. When she's not creating beautiful blondes or enjoying being outside, she loves to write poetry, nurture her garden, and spend time with her people. Jennifer lost her best friend and sister, Melissa, over 3 years ago and still honors her memory today. And so, if you're interested in wanting to explore a little bit about Jennifer's story and connect with her, see what she's offering as she goes on this journey, you could follow her at LIV, the number two, be happy underscore. And I'm going to share this in the description for the podcast. So wherever you're listening to this, just look at the description. You'll see her Instagram handle, and you can go ahead and follow her there to keep up with her. And as always, you guys can follow me over at the Star Whisperer Official on any social media or thestarwhisperer.com. So thank you again, Jennifer. I'm super excited to dive into this and allow us to remove the filter that our society has created around grief and what really
Yes.
needs to be said. So, before we get into the depths of grief and loss, I'd love for you to give us a little bit of your personal story and how grief entered your life, what happened, and whatever you feel comfortable with sharing to begin with.
Sure. So, I was born in 1970 and my sister was born in 68. So we were 22 months apart, but grew up, being dressed as twins, even though I was actually almost as big as her. So I was a big baby.
Yeah.
And so she, over the years was my best friend and like a second mother to me. She was the one that taught me about boys and, you know, girly things that happen to you and how to get through betrayals and being punished and helping me clean my room when I got in trouble for not cleaning my room. Um, we were very close. Some siblings are not, and some are, and we were. Um, that's not to say we didn't have our share of fights. I mean, she taught me how to fight. So, uh, I'm. I think I was 49. I was living in Jersey, where we were all from, and my sister had been in Florida for about 7 years. And after repeatedly asking for 6 of those 7 years, had been asking me to move here so that we could raise our kids together. She had 5 kids. I had 2 kids. Um, and so I finally did it. I moved here a little tiny over 6 years ago. Um, we lived a mile apart. We raised our kids together like we wanted. We spent a lot of time every holiday we got to spend together after years, almost 7 years of not being able to do that so easily. Um, it was great. That was for 3 years. And 3 years into me living here, tragically, she passed suddenly. Um, she had some heart issues. And it, I was woken up at 6:40 a.m. on Saturday, May 7th of 2022, to a text saying that I needed to get over there from my brother-in-law. And oddly enough, I had to work that day. It was a Saturday. I'm a hairstylist. So normally I don't wake up till 9 because I start at 11. And for some reason, I was holding my phone. I was actually looking at my phone that morning. And I had texted back, why? I thought it was a joke. I thought maybe like they wanted me to come make them breakfast, or maybe they'd had an argument and they wanted, I wasn't sure. So I text back, why? And then I text my sister immediately, what's going on? Why is, my brother-in-law telling me to come over to the house? And I never got a response. So I immediately got out of bed, started getting dressed. My son wanted to take the ride with me. He was 13 at the time. And we drove over, which was a mile away, and saw the ambulance and fire trucks. And I walked inside the house and watched them working on my sister, watched them put her in the ambulance, and drove to the hospital, and she had made it. So from there on, it really just my whole world unraveled from that second on. Um, Mostly due to the fact that I had worried about so many other people passing away as a fear. I worried about my parents who are elderly. I worry about my kids. I worry about my friends. I have best friends, several of them for 25, 30 years. I've always worried and, secretly worried about people passing. And I never, ever worried about my sister. It's not that I didn't worry. To me, she was my rock, and we were going to go through my parents passing someday together, and she was going to take charge and tell me what to do. She was the executor of their estate. And it just was, my role was for her to lead us through life. And so I think it was way more shocking for me because I just never pictured the order of the way that things happened ever. Um, I just always thought it would be me and her. So that's where my story starts, is just really learning a new normal that didn't feel normal at all.
Yeah. I just want to say first, as always, and I've said this to you before, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story. I think we need to grow comfortable with sharing and in talking about these stories that are inside of us. Because I know something you and I have spoken about is in our culture today, there's so often little support for individuals that lose a sibling, that
Yes,
there's a lot of support for individuals that lose a spouse or a child. And I want to be very careful in saying that that's not saying a loss is of greater depth or
absolutely not.
hurt. But what happens is that there wasn't true support or even knowledge or anything like that around this for you. And so what for you, it's almost like not only is you're going through the shock of this moment is happening
Right.
and this journey began, there's also this other part of the missing support that you so needed and wanted. Um, and so what I would love to just hear from you is as this chapter is unfolding for you and as we're beginning this um journey of grief, it's like that initial shock is what a lot of people, there's another word that I've read people call this. There's like the shock, there's like the shock and awe phase where there's this moment where it's almost like I don't believe this. I don't believe this is happening right now, or the denial that this isn't
Right.
happening. Um, and
It's like
so
the bad dream, right? Like the
yeah,
it's
it's
this
not
can't be
happening.
real.
Yeah,
Right. And that lasts for quite a while. You wake up many mornings with the realization of this is real. Like
yeah,
this really happened.
yeah,
I think one of the things I'll remember the most is after coming back from the hospital and going back to my sister's house where my family was, my brother-in-law and my kids or her kids. Um, I remember us all sitting out in the driveway. There was somebody had put her patio table in the driveway with all the chairs, and who had gone and gotten Dunkin' and who had gone and gotten sandwiches for everybody, and all of her friends came. I think the most shocking part for me was sitting there numb, not believing that this was real, that she was really gone just like that. And we just had dinner the night before, and the very next day was to be Mother's Day. Um, was that an Amazon truck pulled up and the guy got out of his truck and walked over with the package and walked over to the table where everybody was sitting and said hello and put the package down and went and got back in his truck and drove away. And I thought to myself, wow, the world is just going on. Like,
mm,
of course it is, but the but to you, you feel like the carousel should stop, the music should stop, like the whole world should stop.
mhm.
This is so enormous to you. And it's
Yeah,
really it's humbling to think how little it affects anyone other than the people who it affects, right?
totally.
And
And
so, yeah,
I love that you bring that up because I think that's like if you look at it like realizations you're about to go through as you embrace grief, one of the first things you're going to come into seeing is that what is very real and life stopping for you, what pauses the clock, and it almost feels like I'm living this day over and over again. Everyone else around us seemingly is moving forward.
right,
And it's very difficult and sometimes can be frustrating that the world can move on when the most important person in your life just passed away.
right,
And it's so important to be graceful for with ourselves in those moments because yes, there is that Amazon truck guy that's coming in and he's leaving. And there is that, I like the word that you use, humbling. This moment of just like, holy shit. What is happening right now? Like what really is happening? And I don't think many people truly understand what that is like until you've experienced the sensation of you were just here and now you're not.
right.
This instantaneous, I was just having dinner with you yesterday and now I can't even talk to you.
Right. And two
Um,
days before that, she had painted my nails. She always wanted to paint my
yeah,
fingernails because I'm a hairstylist. So I always have like she used to tease that I looked like a mechanic because I would have 5N, which is like
yeah,
the basic brown color on my nails. And so she had just painted them for me 2 days before that. And I'm looking at this polish that's on my nails that she put on there and actually worrying like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do when this chips off? Like it's gone forever. Your mind really
yeah,
starts thinking of bizarre things. Even the people that were there as they started to leave, I'm like, they're going to go home and they're sad. Of course, they're sad. But tomorrow they have plans to go to Disney with their family,
Hmm.
and next week they leave for Europe, and life is just going to go on. But your world is
Stopped.
shattered. Yeah, it's different. It's
Hmm.
forever different.
Hmm.
And it's
And
such a weird thing for your mind to wrap around, right?
totally, totally. And you know what I used to call it? Like for me was like I felt like I was in a time loop. I really, really, truly did. That time was on repeat. It was just like I was not able to leave a specific time frame. It was like that was it could have been 3 months later and I was still there and nothing
Uh,
was changing. It's like
Like
this,
Groundhog's Day, right?
yeah, it never
It's like
ends.
over and over. It's a loop, like you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. And so for you, what I would I know when you mentioned that with your sister being here, she taught you how to fight. She taught you how to stand up for yourself. It sounds like she taught you how to be that person. Um, when and I think that's a huge part of who you become. And so I'm curious with her, now being in spirit, um, has she helped you?
She's helped me so much. I have still such a close relationship with Melissa. It's just I have to know in my heart what she's saying or thinking or responding. And oddly enough, I do.
Hmm.
So it's been 3 years, and that's obviously that doesn't mean that I don't grieve. It's kind of been this weird shift from feeling numb because it took a while for me to realize that my role now, not just in my immediate core family,
Yeah.
there's only four of us. It was me and Melissa and my parents, and they're both still living. And so it took me a really long time. I'm going to say until probably in the last 6 months to really know what my role was because we had such an odd dynamic, Melissa and I. So even though she was older and she was the leader in some ways, I was always I relied on the fact that I was younger and feistier. So I was protective of her in ways. So
Yeah.
she was a lot, not always, it's complex, but she was a lot, I don't want to say more kind because I am kind also, but she was more passive in some ways. And
Hmm.
so I was always the one to encourage her, like, well, you should say this, or you should do this, or don't let that happen, or why did they say that to you? Or validate her being stronger in some ways. And then she validated for me to be stronger in some ways. So when it was just me to pick up both roles for myself, right? And it just the whole dynamic changed. I didn't know what my role was. I didn't
Yeah.
know who I was. I actually did not know who I was. I felt like I was rebirthed
Yeah.
at 52 years old, and that I didn't know. I think I was actually 51, but and she was 53 when she passed, and I just didn't know who I was. I
Hmm.
didn't know who to lean on. I didn't know she had a particular role in my core family, the four of us.
Yeah.
And I like she planned the holidays and I showed up like at her house as a guest to help with stuff. But then like the holidays were broken. She cooked everything for Christmas, all the Christmas cookies. Like I didn't know I don't do that. I don't bake. I do cook, but I don't bake.
Yeah.
So holidays feel different. Everything feels different. It was a totally new normal that I really resisted against for a long time. And there's always going to be joy missing from a lot of those things because it's just never going to be the same.
No.
And and that's okay because you can make some new traditions and I still feel her I
Yeah.
still feel her there. Um, and I talk with her all the time. I
Yeah.
ask her questions and I can hear what she would say going off of just body memory and mind memory of who she was.
Yeah. I love what you just brought up about the idea of the roles changing. One thing we're going to talk about in a little bit today and again in the future is how relationships shift. Our own relationship shift, our own role in the world shifts. Everything changes as a result of this. And, joy isn't the same. And I always share with people it's okay to be sad and it is okay to also be happy at the same time. And I think sometimes it can be very difficult when, there's little moments of joy that you have. There's little moments of happiness that you have, but it doesn't erase the void that you feel. That there is a missing part in this world, and I will carry her or him with me wherever I go in this life. But there is that constant reminder of feeling. And I feel like that's that soul connection that you shared with your sister, for an example, um, where the soul remembers. I believe that with all of my heart. The soul does not forget. And that's what we hold on to. Um, one of the things that this makes me think about that I want to ask, this is a little separate from something personal, but more as a general statement is why do you feel like it's so hard for people? And why are people so afraid of grief? Why is it that in this journey, people feel so alone? Why do you feel like, yeah,
I think that's a great question. For me, I can answer for me.
yeah,
Um, Grief feels lonely because it's in your heart. It's in your heart and your mind. And those are two places that even somebody who lost the same person has a different loss, a different way of how it's affecting them. And so for me, everything changed the way I listened to music. Like I couldn't listen to music for probably a good 3 to 4 months after my sister passed. And for me, that was because there were so many core memories, right? Like growing up in the 70s, we had our record player with the 45,
yeah,
right? And so our first 45 that we got together, if we had two 45s that we got at one time for our new record player in the 70s, I'm going to say it was 76 or 77. So we were, 7 and 9 was I Want to Kiss You All Over by Exile
okay.
and Afternoon Delight.
Oh,
And so in my salon, I always played yacht rock radio.
yeah,
And those were two songs that were constantly on. And so I ended up putting for the first 3 or 4 months, I went back to work a week after my sister passed. Um, really with I tried to handle, I think my issue, why it took so long for me to grieve, is that I tried to handle my grief logically. I'm
mm,
a logical person, and I really tried to. I thought, okay, I'm a strong, wise, in touch with myself person. I can do this. And for me, logically, if I took 2 weeks off of work or 3 weeks off of work or a month, was I going to feel any less sad when I went back? I mean, really, what I wanted to do is never go back to work.
mm,
I wanted to never get out of my bed. I wanted to never hang out with anyone else again for a while. I mean,
mm-hmm,
that's how you feel. You do.
totally,
You isolate, right?
totally,
And so I went back a week after because in my business, if I were to be out 2, 3, 4 weeks, you know what happens? My
yeah,
clients start going elsewhere. They feel bad for you, but they're like, oh, she needs time, we're going to go somewhere else. And
hmm,
that would have just made my situation worse
worse,
because now I'm sad and poor.
yeah, yeah,
So I went back a week later and I immediately knew I cannot listen to music. So I put the TV on. I have a TV on in my suite. I put on the Great British Bake Off
yeah,
on loop. It wasn't sad. It was food. Everybody loved it. Um, And so, I did get to a place where I could put music back on. I still dread hearing, and I have since heard it. It took about 2.5 years, but I still dread hearing the song Sweet Melissa
Yeah.
by the Allman Brothers. It's not that I dread it, it's just it brings back a whole bunch of feelings, which
Yeah.
circles back to your question. Why do we have such a hard time grieving, right? And I think we talked about this, about the stone in your pocket,
Yeah.
about it feeling like there's a stone. Grief is a stone and it's in your pocket and only you know it's there. And there is a time limit that society kind of says, okay, they're good now. They should
Yeah.
be good now. But that stone is always in your pocket. And you could be in the middle of having a great time. All of your girls invite you. It's a pool day. There's espresso martinis. You're floating on rafts. You're listening to great music, and you really are having a genuinely good time. And you just happen to reach in your pocket, and there's that stone in it, and you feel it, and you turn it around in your hand, and the world's still going on in front of you, and they have no idea that you're tossing that pocket around, twirling it in
Hmm.
your hands and feeling very deeply a memory or a smell or a sound
Yeah.
or a sight. It could hit you from anywhere. And those are the moments, and they do get easier as time goes on because you know to accept them just for a moment and not let you spiral and take away your whole day.
Hmm.
um, but you learn to honor them, and
Yeah.
it is again private. It's in your heart and it's in your head. Um, but they come out of nowhere, and they always will. They
Totally.
always will.
One thing that I just thought of as you just said this is I like to I call it, and this isn't my terminology. I actually don't know who said this, but I use this term about engaging with grief,
Hmm.
where I want to consciously create time in my day to hold that rock. I want to sit with that rock. I want to play with it in my fingers, even if it's for 20 minutes or a half hour, to consciously remember those memories, whatever it is. I'm going to intentionally do this every day until I feel as if it's helped mend or helped me integrate whatever that pain or whatever that hurt is wanting for me to integrate and engage with. I find that the more we engage with our hurt and our pain, it makes the moments where you are with the friends and you're having your delicious espresso martini or whatever it may be, when a moment comes in, you're okay. And you could say that to yourself in your heart because I know this like there's a familiarity with this and you become comfortable with this.
Yes, you
Um
do. It's the
and
space before that.
it's super, yeah, totally. Um I think one of the things too I just want to add about society and grief is, which I think you were touching on, is maybe the disconnect with emotions that we have, in the sense where I want you to feel your emotions, but it needs to be to this threshold. If it goes beyond this threshold, I don't want it. And what happens is that there's something about grief that represents the end of life. And I always say that the ego fears that. The ego fears death. And to embrace grief means you need to face death itself. And I feel like there's something to this that I think society is so afraid of, and it's unique because I think it has a lot to do with Western culture, only because when I've talked with people that are outside of Western culture, whether it's in India or whether it's in Switzerland or whether it's in their belief systems are completely different on how they navigate and handle grief.
Yes.
And there's something to this that we need to create more space for whatever those emotions are that you're feeling. Which leads me to my next thought of, like, in your experience, um, grief shows you who could sit with your pain.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear any words of wisdom that you have on this because I know there's going to be people listening to this today that are going to be pissed off, that are going to be raging, that are going to be annoyed, that are going to be sad, that they're going to feel alone because the people who they thought could sit with them are not there. And so I'd love for you to share any thoughts or words of wisdom that you have about, how grief has shown you this and what you've learned.
That's a really, really, really great thing, because I think every single person that grief has touched them on a very personal level, I think they've all experienced this. It's almost you're in disbelief because the people that you really thought would be there aren't.
Mhm.
And then out of nowhere, people that you would have never expected,
Yeah.
or that you that weren't even on your radar, come in like these earth angels and really heal you more than someone that you might have known forever. It could be family, friends,
Yeah,
friends of your person, you
totally.
know? Um, and I think there's a clarity that comes about. There's like this, everything gets brighter, like the colors get brighter and everything kind of comes into focus during those times, because you're like, wow, you have a lot of epiphanies, right? Like
Totally.
epiphanies about humans. Like I feel like going through this and getting to where I am now, which is a process, by the way. I think we beat ourselves up of,
Oh,
that we're not there yet. And you're never really there, but you're there on a level where it still hurts when it's touched, but it's
yeah.
not a raw wound anymore, right? But during those moments when it's raw, the clarity of who is really there for you and not for any other reason, not for the bragging rights of how close or they were with that person when they were
Yeah.
alive, or there's a lot of grandstanding when someone passes. It's like a pissing competition of who was closer and who knew them the longest. And ironically for me, and I'm just going to say this, when I moved here, my sister and I have had a deep connection our entire lives. But because my sister was here in Florida for 7 years before I moved here, I think some of the people that she was friends with kind of, because they didn't see us together until I moved here,
Yeah.
I feel like there were a lot of connections that were made. And let's just say this, my sister made a ton of friends. I used to tease and call that she was the mayor. Okay.
Huh.
She knew everybody. She was
Yeah.
kind to everyone, and unless, she wasn't.
Yeah.
But she really was. I mean, she got along with all of her kids' teachers, and she made a lot of friends and a lot of connections.
Yeah.
And the community loved her. They did. And so I felt like when she moved here, and then I was here the 3 years, and then she passed, I felt like there was a lot of, almost like a pissing contest of who knew her the longest and who was closest. And I was just the little sister, and I really felt like a lot of ego came into
100%.
to her passing, and what she would have wanted and what she would have been disappointed in and what she would have said and how she would have felt, when really I feel like I knew that best, because
Mhm.
the, and not that it matters. I mean, it mattered to me, but it didn't matter except for on the scale of, this is someone that literally was in my life for every single stage, right? Your spouse or husband comes in later in life, right? Or
Mhm.
your wife or your girlfriend, they come later in life, and your parents leave too soon.
Mhm.
So that one constant is a sibling,
Yeah.
especially if you're close. And I think there are some people who are not close with their siblings, And so I think it's even harder for them to really honor when two siblings are really close.
Totally.
And I don't think it was done uh maliciously or nefariously. But I just think that's the pattern, right? People come in and they see me or they see me out, and their first question is, how are your parents? Or how are your nieces and nephews? Or how is your brother in law? And that's so sweet, right?
Yeah.
But I really don't think in our society, maybe in others, but I feel like in our culture, it's really kind of breezed over the siblings. I really don't think people understand, especially if they're not close with their own sibling, or maybe they don't have siblings,
Yeah.
that there is a connection. There is a bond there. There are nights giggling under the covers and our deepest, darkest secrets and our shared hurts of our childhood and our shared joys and our favorite snacks that we made up and our little funny language we did walking around the furniture stores, through our childhood while our
Yeah.
parents were off looking at furniture, and we made our own language so that people would think we were from somewhere else, and funny sayings we had between each other, and recipes, and just all different music and dances we did as kids. And then, even just the bond of raising kids and talking on the phone constantly and sharing advice, and
Yeah.
when should they start preschool, and there was so many connections there that I don't think are acknowledged by society sometimes, and it's very lonely. So for me, I kind of isolated just because I felt very misunderstood and not acknowledged, and even sometimes by family members. And I'm sure they probably have their feelings as well. I did personally try to acknowledge everyone else. Um, it's very hard. It's very hard to give and isolate at the same time.
Oh
I think
yeah.
there's a lot to go on in your mind aside just from the fact that you just lost your person. There's
Totally.
so many politeties and things to say and do and make sure happen and kind of coddle everyone else. And sometimes you lose your own sense of self
Totally.
and you delay your own grief because you're so worried about everybody else and how they feel and nurturing their sadness, that you kind of lose yourself. And so for
Totally.
me it was, I had a delayed grieving process due
Yeah.
to that. And I also made myself physically sick. Like I was ill for about a year and I had no idea what was going on with my body. And it
Yeah.
was really suppressed grief
Hmm.
because it was never a great time, right? I'm either working or I'm alone or I'm having a good day and I don't want to disrupt that by thinking about it. Like you said
Yeah.
earlier, like you almost, it's not that you want to push it away because those feelings come up, those memories, the smells.
Totally.
I'm a very sensory person personally. So
Yeah.
there are so many things. I mean, a color, I could see a color. My sister's favorite color was yellow.
Yeah.
I see yellow and I mean, I'm thinking about her all day long. I'm actually trying to find moments where I'm remembering to just live,
Yeah.
you know?
And and I don't think people understand that. That's something that I think is super important because when you do lose someone that is that important to you, you do not operate in a day-to-day moment without them in your thoughts. And I would say to someone, for an example, that is your best friend, like a sister or a brother, you probably text them every day. You probably call them every day. And you have the ability to do that. I don't. That doesn't exist anymore. I cannot physically do that anymore. That absence of that, I feel in every moment and every
Mhm.
day of how I operate. And so, like you said, it's so difficult because you carry those memories and you carry those instincts that are still there, those impulses being like, oh, let me text her really quick. Let me call her really quick. I
Mhm.
can't do that. And
Right. You lose
and
your
I
go-to.
Totally. And so I think one of the biggest things that I just want to add in this is unfortunately, we do experience that we thought certain people would be there for us, a family member or a friend. And I think because we're not trained or taught in this society the emotional tools to navigate such a potentially challenging emotion as grief, people don't know what to say. They're afraid to say the wrong thing. And out of their own fear of saying the wrong thing, well, what they're doing is they're positioning themselves as not available and absent, which, to be frank, just puts you on my shit list even more. And now it's like, okay, so you were too afraid to talk to me. You didn't have it in you to have a difficult conversation with me. So you just were absent. You weren't even there. Never heard from you. You never did anything. And then you have the audacity to come out of the blue 6 months later and be like, hey, how's it going? And what happens is that I think in these moments, one of the core lessons that you do learn is who is really willing to be there for you
Yeah.
through the most difficult chapter of your life. And there was someone I saw once on Instagram or TikTok or something where they said that when you date someone, and I'm using dating as an example, so apply it in our own personal lives. When you're dating someone and you're going to get married, you want to marry the person that you know is going to be there for you when your parents pass,
Hmm.
that is going to be able to navigate that journey with you when your parents pass, because who you will marry will be there for you when this happens.
Right. During the
And if
gritty.
and if you can't see yourself doing that, then do not be in a relationship with someone that you know can't do that for you. Because
Right.
what's going to happen is that as we go through loss and grief in this life, we will learn very quickly who is there and who is not there.
That is right.
And it sucks. It's a hard truth of the situation. And unfortunately, the true disappointment comes from our expectations that we have of family. And I think we are let down because we thought that because we have family, you would be
Yeah.
there. But the reality is the people who said that they're, oh, I'm their sister, I'm their brother, I'm their this, those are the people, unfortunately, that don't show up.
Right.
That are too consumed. And like you said, it's like, oh, I got a vacation. I'm gonna go vacation now. I'm gonna go do this now. Um, And it's sad. And we have to acknowledge that because that's going to be a point that can either trigger intense sadness or intense anger. And I want to honor both and say both are valid. Let's feel what that is because you don't want that to linger in your body as you get older. You were going to say something. Go ahead.
I was just what you just said resonates with me. I think so because I isolated personally, I was invited, I was invited to things in the months after, the year after, and I just wasn't in a place to do that.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I don't drink when I'm sad, so I didn't want to have drinks. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want my presence to lead to having to then be out somewhere and talk about my sister being gone,
Hmm.
or even memories yet. I wasn't ready for that. And so this I had social anxiety to go anywhere. So my solution was to go to work and then go home. and
Yeah.
and not, I wasn't dating anyone at the time. I had been single for several years, without have gone on one date. My focus was, being with my kids. My daughter was in uh, out of college and living on her own at the time, but my son um, was home, and so I refused a lot of invitations. And I think after a point when you say no so many times, and I could feel it, I could feel the amount of invitations and me saying no. I know socially that at some point the invites just stop, right?
Yeah.
But I felt like not only did they stop, which I was okay with, because it got to a point where I was tired of saying no. I felt it made me feel some kind of way to keep saying no. So it was
Yeah.
almost a relief when they stopped and it kind of went quiet. But what I didn't expect is for it to to feel very much so like I was then punished, or that I was then um just excluded in
Yeah.
general. Even if you saw somebody at the store, or you saw somebody walking down the street or in a parking lot, to feel like, oh, okay, now not only am I not in the circle, but I'm also now the bad guy. Like I'm rude, or I've been rude to other people, not to have not
Yeah.
shown up to anything. And I think there's a whole part of that that really needs to be fixed, because that's where you're learning, right? I
Totally.
have people now on the positive side of that story. I have people who, it doesn't matter if I haven't called in 6 months or texted or gone to
Yeah.
anything that they've invited me to. They could let 6 months go by where I don't hear from them, and then they'd be like, hey, I'm having a get together this Sunday if you're up to it. If not, no pressure, I totally understand. It could be last minute. You don't have to RSVP, or you could just show up.
Yeah.
Those are my kind of people, because
100%.
I don't know, when you invite me to a party in 2 months, I don't know what on that
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
what I'm going to be feeling. I could
Bingo.
wake up some mornings and feel amazing and feel inspired and connected to Melissa. And she just sent me a sign, and I feel
Yeah.
refreshed and renewed. Or I can wake up and it's been a couple weeks without feeling her or
Yeah.
feeling connected, because I feel like she's busy somewhere else doing, taking care of her
Totally.
other loved ones. And so I'm feeling a little sad, or I've just remembered that morning and replayed it in my head, which I try not to do, because that's
Yeah.
more trauma than it is honoring her. And so maybe I wake up that day and I'm like, well, crap, yesterday I was so excited to go to this pool party, or
Yeah.
this cookie exchange, or whatever it is that you're invited to, and now I can't even imagine
The
putting
thought.
clothes on. I'm going to
Yeah.
stay in my pajamas all day, and I'm going to leave yesterday's makeup on. It's going to be one of those days.
Yeah.
And then the guilt of being like, but people like that, who I said before, who are like, just come if you want, if not, no hard feelings, we'll get together in a few months. Those are my people, because
Yeah.
you need that cushion. You need
Totally.
that is supporting someone who has just lost
100%.
someone. And this is 3 years later, and I could have a day like that. You don't
Yeah.
know. um so I really feel like what you said is so correct, that you really find out who are your people and
Yeah.
who were there conditionally when everything was great and that person was alive, and
Correct.
it kind of separates everything for you. It
Yeah. It sucks. It really does suck to know that. That's unfortunately how we learn. But it's a reality that I find that anyone that has gone through grief, there comes a moment where you realize who really understands, who's really there empathetically, and who could hold space for that pain. Um, so I feel like if you're listening to this, I know there's going to be people that are going to sit there and be like, yeah, I remember this person. This person is supposed to be this person to me, and they didn't even they did this or blah 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 blah. One thing that I kept hearing as you were speaking was the word selfishness. And that is going to show up in grief, is individuals who are selfish.
Mhm.
And that selfishness manifests in so many different ways. But I think what we need to do, I think, is for us to feel our own grief. It's almost like, and you said this earlier, everybody grieves differently, and not everybody has the capacity to feel into grief with you. And that's okay. And in the magic words of Mel Robbins, let them. Let them take
Yeah.
that path, because the sooner you allow them to show you who they are, the sooner you can move forward and meet the right people.
Right.
Um, you don't have to surround yourself with those people anymore. You don't need to keep those friends just because they're an aunt, an uncle, a brother, a sister, a blue, whoever they are. Doesn't mean they need
Mhm.
to be in your life. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I think you can pick who you want to bring with you on this journey, And
Sure.
grief is an invitation for us to discover who will be there for us. Um, you and I were talking before we came on how circles just get gradually smaller.
Hmm.
You think you have this, you go to the funeral, you have two, three, 400 people there. And there's this huge camaraderie of people that are showing up. That goes down to like two people, three people, four people. And
Hmm.
you ask yourself, what the hell happened? Was this person not that important to you that like you just really moved on? Really, like it just isn't even a story in your mind. It's not even a thought. And that's coming from a grieving person, right? We feel that when you don't show up, it's not that important to you. It's not a priority. And so
Yeah.
it's go ahead, sorry.
That's compli No, that's complicated. So for me, and I don't know if this aligns with what you're saying, but I will say this. So since prior to my sister passing, I had not lost anyone. I lost a very good guy friend of mine
Yeah.
uh, when I was 24, and that was tough. But I had known him for 3 years, and we were really close. And I think about him to this day.
Yeah.
But other than that, I had never experienced a loss that touched me like my sister's loss. Okay.
Totally.
And so I used to go, and I'm going to say the word obligatorily,
Yeah.
to people's parents' viewings. And, I showed my respect,
Yeah.
but it didn't affect me, obviously, like my friend that I was going for, or my coworker that I was going for. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I went to my sister's, and that was one of the hardest things I had ever done. And I had written a poem, and I read that poem, in, up at the, on, at the, what do you call that thing you stand at?
The altar, is it the altar or the podium?
Podium. I read my poem. I don't really remember. I don't remember doing it, but I know I did it. I have
Yeah.
some memory. Well, because of that, I I had some trauma from all of that whole day. It was
Yeah.
overwhelming to me when I wanted to be in a dark room curled up, right?
Totally.
And so from here forward, I've had a couple people who have lost their mom, or recently someone lost their son who I know, and I can't go. I do respectfully let them know,
Hmm.
hey, I'm I'm there with you on that day. I'm thinking of you. But I can't do it because for me, it's still, even 3 years later, it's still too fresh to be in it. It puts me in a place that might knock me out for a week or two.
Yeah.
And so I have a hard time, with that, because I feel guilty, because I know that it looks like I don't care. And
Hmm.
I do care so deeply, but for self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
For my own self-well-being. And I don't know if
It,
that'll ever change. Obviously, at some point, there are going to be some that I'm going to have to
yeah.
attend, and I'll have to pull my big girl pants up and go.
Yeah.
But at this time, it would have to be a situation where I
Yeah.
have to go. And
Right.
so I just want to clarify, and I know that you feel this way too, that it's not that you go on vacation when we're grieving, that you still go on vacation. It's that you go on vacation and then kind of separate yourself, and never to look back
Exactly.
or check in, right? That's
Exactly.
what that's what we mean, because we know the world is not going to stop, even though we feel like ours
Bingo.
has. We would just like to be acknowledged and validated and checked in on,
Yeah.
right? Checked in on once in a while, and not made to feel like we're just like TikTok. It's
Yeah.
time to get over it,
Yeah.
right? We got
Totally.
over it. You should get over it. Like
Yeah.
there really is no timeline. And I think if somebody had told me, I mean, I didn't know that. I actually was, when Melissa first died, that first couple of weeks, I tried so hard to find anything to grasp onto, to connect with, especially for sibling. Because, like we
Yeah.
said, and that I think it's wonderful that there's something if you've lost your child or your parent or
Parent.
your
Yeah.
spouse, right? Those are the three most common. I would have taken anything. It wouldn't have mattered because I would have just it would have been applicable to me in
Yeah.
any way, right? But I found two churches that were about a half an hour away each way that were only Spanish speaking, which for me, I that didn't help. That were grief sessions I could go to. I really wanted to go in person.
Yeah.
There were a couple of online ones, but I wasn't really. They were specific to like parent loss, or
Right.
so they didn't really fit. I found a few podcasts um, that helped, but I really had a hard time um, finding anything to help me heal,
Yeah.
and to help me identify with anyone else.
Yeah.
And so, ironically, you were the person that my friend gifted me a session
Oh,
with you,
yeah.
and you helped me heal immensely, or at least understand the process, and allowed me to honor myself. And I think that's what's most important, is that there is no timeline, because from what I had researched, some people said it takes about a year, it takes about 2 years. And then the
Yeah.
more I researched, I realized, well, there's a million numbers being thrown at me.
Which one
Like,
is it?
yeah, like I can
Yeah.
do a year, like I could probably get through a year. And
Yeah.
the whole problem is that you can't even think that far. You literally just need to take an hour at a time, not even a
Correct.
day,
No,
right?
exactly. Exactly. Literally
And
in the
so for
beginning
anyone
stages,
out
it's
there that's in the new stages of losing someone, and you're thinking, well, we want to know the whys always, right? We want to know
yeah,
why or when or how. Eh, Just throw all of that out the window. That's my best advice to you, to throw all of that out the window, because there really is no time limit. And the longer you avoid grieving,
yeah,
the longer it's going to take you to get any kind of progress towards
100%.
the grieving.
I love that you just said that. That is beautiful, and I'm going to quote that. Um,
There's a bug flying around me. I'm trying to
that
catch
is,
it.
and the truth is that the longer you postpone your grieving and you don't engage with this, it will affect every other core area of your life.
Oh, definitely.
which which Jennifer and I talked about, talking about these different areas like relationships, like family dynamics, your relationship with yourself. These are going to be core areas that you're going to notice the effects of not actively engaging with a major loss and major grief moment. Um, and so I think about what you are saying, it's almost like sometimes when you're in a state of grief, you feel invisible and you just want to feel visible for a minute and held without having to ask for it. Um, it's almost like when you're in a state of grief, you already have so much in that brain and heart of yours
Right.
that you don't want to have to think about you don't want to have to think about other people. Like you were saying, you were trying to, but deep down inside of us, it's like, my brain can't do it right now. I'm I'm just trying to take this minute for what it is. Like it is this, like I'm here right now. This is the only time I have. It's 2:45, right? And I'm just taking it minute by minute. And it's almost like sometimes being able to have people that can actually be there with you at 2:45 and maybe ask the questions. One thing I've learned is that a lot of people that are in different stages of grief want to have the difficult conversations. They want to talk about things. But because there's so much uncertainty of like, oh, well, what if I say this? Is it going to be a trigger? Is she going to get upset if I say this? What's going to happen if I ask this question? There's no engagement. And what I love that you said about your relationship with going to a funeral, you communicate though. You're like, hey,
Yes.
this is how I feel. and I'm really sorry, but this is what's going on for me right now. It's not an act of like invisibility, like I'm ignoring this, I'm not dealing with this.
Correct.
And what's missing, I think, in grief is the communication.
Absolutely. You just nailed it. That is exactly what it is, right? Because if we don't and that goes for any relationship.
Yeah, totally.
That's any relationship is always going to benefit your work
Totally.
environment, your family, your
Everything.
friends, your spouse or partner. All of that is going to be better if you just communicate and just be honest and authentic. I think the authenticity is
100%.
is is this stigma of and we're supposed to do this and we're supposed to say this and we're supposed to bring this, and it's just the organic side of it and just saying your feelings,
Oh,
because if you ask me something about my sister, especially in the beginning, I didn't take that. If someone were to come up to me and say, what's one of your favorite memories of your sister, I wouldn't have been like, oh, don't talk about my sister. And everybody's different, so maybe
yeah.
somebody else would, right? Maybe they
You got
would.
it.
I wouldn't have been like offended. I would
Yeah.
have actually thought about that and I would have answered that. And it would have made me feel good to tell a
That's
memory. It would have made
exactly.
me feel good. But instead, it was like her name was taboo and we pretended like I didn't have a sister ever.
Bingo.
And that was harder because you're trying to be polite, so you play along, and then you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I didn't have a sister, it's just me, which really just ultimately makes you feel even more alone than you
A hundred
actually
percent.
are. You actually are alone because she's
A
not
hundred
here.
percent.
And so it's
I
it's a
love
it's
what
a
you just said. I love what you just said because why do we not keep their memory alive? It's this really, it's very sad thoughts to think that our most important person who just passed away, all we want to do maybe is hear a story or talk about a story, and no one wants to ask. No one wants to talk about it, whether it's out of ignorance, their own fear, their
right.
insecurities, or they're just selfish. Whatever the excuse
Or it makes
is,
them uncomfortable, right? They
yeah.
That's uncomfortable for them.
And whatever that
And
excuse may be, whatever my reasoning is why I'm not sharing this story. I promise you that we don't forget in this context that I can't let in my brain, it's like this happened, this person didn't have this, or but then you also on a positive note will remember the people that are like, let's talk about this. Oh my God, do you remember this time? Or wow, that was a really difficult moment, or whatever it may be, the highs and the lows. It's like meeting those people and being able to or having those family members or those friends. But unfortunately, all we have in grief is memories.
yeah,
And I think people don't realize that. I think people who haven't lost someone important don't realize that what someone has after is only the memory.
yeah.
And that's what we carry for the rest of our lives. And what happens is as you get older, you start to forget things.
Mm-hmm.
You start to no longer remember memories the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, out of not telling stories, the memory dies, the
Right.
stories die. And all someone that is grieving wants is to keep those things alive because it's
Right.
what they have forever. And it's sad that we go through these experiences,
Yeah.
but I'm grateful that you're here, Jennifer, to talk about them so that we could bring more light to these difficult areas that we want to bring more light to be like, oh, wow. If I know someone that passes, if I have a friend or a family member or something, that I know that I'm close to, I should probably ask them questions and tell stories with them and do things like that. Um, and I promise you this, if someone who's grieving doesn't want to talk about it, they will let you know. They'll say, hey, I don't want to talk about that right now.
Well,
That's
and
not,
I had to do that. I had
yeah,
clients come in, right, a week after my sister passed. And, um, I think we talked about this too. They would say, how are you?
Oh,
And I felt I felt like that was too loaded of a question. I didn't
exactly.
know how to answer that. Like
Correct.
I really didn't. And because I want to be authentic, I don't want to just say good, because then that's
Not
wrong. That
true.
felt
Yeah.
wrong because it's not true. But I mean, I'm okay. But you know, I think we discussed where it would be nice if people actually said, "How are you today?
Yeah.
How are you today?" Because I can tell you how I am today.
Yeah.
It's not so open ended, you know,
Exactly.
and and you can be honest and say, "I'm actually having a rough day, so I appreciate you asking, but I'm not ready to talk about my sister yet." And
Exactly.
again, communicating, right? Because now that person knows they're not offended, they you haven't
Yeah.
let them do it, and then tell them you're
Totally.
just communicating right up front, and then they know how to, it kind of helps guide them too, because it is
Bingo.
awkward to be on the other side
A
of
hundred
that.
percent.
I've been there before, and I wish I had known what I know now
Exactly.
on the other side of that. I
You
know
handle
now
it
going
differently now.
forward. Correct.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and we talked about the worst day, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
everybody has a worst day. And most people think they've already had their worst day until they do.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, this is my worst day,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a lot of people, myself included, before my sister passed. I thought I had had such bad days. And I
Same.
realized I was very humbled again to realize that I had not had my worst day. And if you haven't had your worst day, it's very hard to navigate being around someone who has. And so communication is the answer
A
there.
hundred percent.
Just communicate your feelings, communicate, be honest. You don't have to be rude about it and tell some, you don't have to snip at people and
Yeah.
make someone feel badly for it, but you can communicate genuinely and authentically,
Yeah.
uh, where you're at, and maybe kind of how to handle
Yeah.
this interaction that we're about to have, and kind of steer the ship there,
Yeah.
you know?
I think that is a great topic for another conversation. The concept of how to navigate when that moment unfolds. Um, one thing that Jen and I talked about was, you know, breaking down grief in a few other episodes, talking about, again, how this will show up and affect your personal relationships. Um, I've seen divorce happen because of grief. I've seen relationships begin because of grief, which
Right.
then lead to divorce. Like I've seen all sorts of circumstances, how our own personal relationships change. Who you are before and after is completely different. And as we lose the person that we loved, we also, like you shared earlier, which I loved, we lose parts of ourselves. There's a part of us that dies with them when they go.
That's absolutely right.
And we have to be okay with that. And there's no timeline at all. It could take months, it could take years, it doesn't, you just don't know. And I think there's a big lesson in all of this, which is our goal here is just communicating and sharing this, is getting the conversation started for us on grief.
Right.
And I feel like there's so much for us to unpack together, Jennifer. I appreciate you so much for being here and sharing all of this with us and being able to share your personal experiences and also share your wisdom from those experiences with us because, you know, that's what it's all about, is sharing what we learn and in hopes that it connects and resonates with someone that's listening. And so one of the things Jennifer and I talked about was that if there are specific topics or questions that you have related to grief, if there's something you're going through right now that is challenging you, that you're trying to understand, whether it's in the mind or in the heart or spiritually, I'd encourage you to reach out over social media. through Instagram or send me an email what those questions are, because if we do have a good amount of questions, one thing we talked about was doing an episode just answering people's questions. So if you have questions that you'd love to be answered, please share them.
Please.
And we'd love to answer them. Now, Jennifer, I have one last question I want to ask you. This is kind of a question I
Yes.
like to bring together for people, for anyone that comes on Between Soul and Sky, a question that kind of brings it all together for us. And the podcast itself is called Between Soul and Sky. And so between the soul and the sky, and knowing that grief becomes our teacher.
Right.
And even in grief and everything we've talked about, what do you think the soul came here to remember?
I think the soul came here to remember just connection and and honoring where you are when you're there, and not trying to be in a place that you're not, or regretful that you weren't then or that you haven't been yet, and to really just live the experience and authentically live the experience, and stop putting limitations and time limits and expectations on yourself to be somewhere that you're just not yet, and to really hold space for life to be the what it can be and what
Yeah.
it should be for you at that moment.
Yeah.
I think that really kind of takes a lot of pressure off of
Totally.
everything else. It just allows you to sit in the moment and honor whatever that is,
For
you
whatever
know,
it is.
for whatever it is.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what we're supposed to do, and how we're supposed to feel at ease, um, instead of dis-ease, which
Yeah.
is causes dis-ease.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that. Um, I think there's something to those words that you just said that are magical, that I think is going to really connect with a lot of people, especially today, given the current context and climate of the world. I think there's something beautiful that you just shared. And I think, you know, do you really want to be somewhere else? Because if you're really wanting and praying to be somewhere else and not here in this moment, will you ever even enjoy that moment? Or are you going to consistently keep wanting something different and you're never really here? You're just going to be in that space until you go.
That's right.
I love that you said that. I appreciate you so much, Jennifer.
I
Thank you
appreciate you,
for your
Ricky.
wisdom. And again, I just wanna mention this one more time. If you would like to follow Jennifer, her Instagram handle is live, the number 2, be happy underscore. I will tag her in the posts. So if you'd like to follow her and keep up with her with what she'll be offering, please do this. And Jennifer and I will be back very soon to talk more about these subjects, because I think there's a lot more that we can unpack together. So I appreciate all of you, Jennifer. Again, I appreciate you for being here. Um, it was a beautiful episode. I think we got to introduce and start removing the filter of grief. So thank you.
I appreciate you too. And I think what you're doing is a beautiful thing.
As for finishing up the episode, my headphones just died, so I apologize. So funny how that happens. Um, I appreciate you. Again, thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
tuning in, everyone. I hope you all have a beautiful day or evening wherever you're listening to this. And as always, have a beautiful one. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.